Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again, and thank you as always for taking the time to tune in to today's episode. And today is a really special one for me because I am very, very happy to be joined by entrepreneur and co-founder and head of engineering at Neo Financial, Kris Read, who is here to share some insights on his entrepreneurial journey. A key statement, I was doing a bit of research as I tried to do before each interview, and a key statement that really struck me as what I believe to be the heart of Neo Financial is a phrase from a promotional video that's on your website. I'm sure you're very, very clued into what this is, Kris, or maybe not, that's okay too, but it said, "What if the future of banking wasn't a bank?" A very short video, and I thought that was very, very hard hitting for me. Just in terms of thought provocation, and what that actually means. It's intriguing. It makes me want to find out a little bit more. So I'll tell you a wee bit more about Neo before I open it up to Kris here. So Neo is a leading financial technology company that's building a more rewarding financial experience while empowering more Canadians to take control of their future via products such as everyday banking, credit, investment and mortgage offerings. If I haven't included everything in there, Kris, my apologies. And a key philosophy is for them to help customers get more value out of every single dollar that they earn and that they save and that they spend. And it has been recognised as Canada's #1 startup by LinkedIn for 2 years in a row, and works with local retailers, large enterprises and financial institutions to transform the future of financial services. So here's a wee bit of a background here. Kris and I met, I think it was roughly about 15 years ago or thereabouts, maybe 14, something like that. And we were both at a company here in Calgary called Shaw Communications, which is now Rogers Communications. And at the time, Kris was an external consultant through a company called ThoughtWorks, and I was a contract project manager. My journey kind of stayed the same for about the 13 or 14 years in between, and Kris's took a whole bunch of twists and turns, and learnings were abound there for him over that period of time, and that's obviously what we're going to spend a wee bit of time talking about. Kris, my friend, thank you very, very much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We've known each other for a long time, and I'm really happy to be here and maybe share a few insights about Neo and, like you said, kind of my career journey too.
Yeah, ideal. So just as we were just about to start recording earlier, you had given me a wee bit of an insight into where ThoughtWorks, where you and I got introduced to each other, where that
Yeah,
stood within your entrepreneurial journey. So kind of going back to the entrepreneurial journey for a second, can you provide a little bit of an overview, a summary of where it's taken you and how that led you to Neo?
absolutely. I think it started when I was at the University of Calgary. I'm a graduate here in Calgary, and I did a master's degree during the sort of dot-com bust, right? So,
Yeah,
imagine all the startups are going out of business because the dot-com bust is happening. It makes sense to stay in school a couple
yeah,
more years rather than trying to get a job. So I did a master's degree, and as part of that master's degree, I got to travel, go to a lot of conferences, present papers. It's academics, but in a lot of ways, you're kind of your own boss. You're plotting your own course. You have to kind of build those relationships, networking skills, and things
definitely.
like that. So I like to think that was sort of the start of entrepreneurship for me. It was, going to a conference, introducing myself to people who were a lot smarter than me, and trying to make a good impression and things like that. And then coming out of that degree, my first job was actually at a startup as a software developer. And again, like kind of absorbing through osmosis what it's like to be at a startup company, the challenges that a startup company has. And this was a company that was really early stage. I remember how shoddy the office building that we were in was. It was like dust falling from the ceiling, and old dingy carpets. The elevator never works, stuff like that. And that kind of really made an imprint on my career. Years later, I ended up at ThoughtWorks, after being at a number of startup companies. And that was a huge turning point for me, kind of going from being the tech guy to being the consulting guy. And as the consulting guy, it's not really about the tech. It's
Yeah.
about the people, selling, convincing people you're right, even if you're not right. Again, building more and more of those relationships. And I spent a lot of time at ThoughtWorks, not only consulting, but helping them with things like sales. I used to be on the road flying. I think one week I did 4 cities in 1 week, just doing like sales pitches for
Wow.
ThoughtWorks at different companies. So that was a real different experience and kind of helped me grow into the co-founder I am today. Went on to have a payments company for a number of years and got really involved in fintech, and then kind of graduated on to Neo, where I've been for the last 5 years. And Neo has grown from being 3 guys at the library, which is kind of how we started Neo, to today 600 or 700 people. We have 4 offices, and winning awards for fastest growing Canadian company.
Yeah, I love it. Like literally, you started at the library getting things off the
Yeah,
ground.
it's kind of a getting to become a famous story, but when Andrew, our CEO, my co-founder Kris Read, and myself started the company, we used to go to the Calgary Public Library, the downtown branch, and we would go like 7 days a week. We would show up when they opened. We'd
Yeah.
be there when the security guard unlocked the doors. We'd go into the library. We would spend all day at the library because it was the only place you could really spend the whole day. And there'd be a whiteboard and some breakout rooms we could use. And we spent 5 or 6 months doing nothing but planning Neo, day in and day out, weekends, weekdays, at that library, until we'd actually started hiring a team and eventually had to get a space to hang out in and work in.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the space you got to hang out and work in didn't have dust falling from the
Oh, it
ceilings.
did.
And oh,
It
it
did.
did.
Our first office was at a co-working space, and I remember we moved into a little fishbowl meeting room in like a co-working space. It was the cheapest co-working space you could get in Calgary. Really old furniture. The chairs were all broken.
Yeah,
It was a great space to start, a company in. And again, we were on a tight budget.
yeah,
But yeah, I think every startup company should go through that roughing it phase. In a lot of ways, Neo's culture today is still a frugal culture where we're
yeah.
careful with money, and we try and invest every dollar very wisely because we had to go through those tough times in the early days.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that. Just earlier today, I was thinking about my journey. My entrepreneurial journey is just over a year old, essentially, and I was chatting with someone. I think it was just towards the end of last week there, and saying, you know, business is not what I thought it was going to be. For a variety of different reasons, some good, some less than desirable. But what would I have learned about myself and about business and about industry and about marketing and about value proposition and creation for clients and such if all of this had come to me super quick at the very beginning, not really time to transition from corporate land to entrepreneurial land. So I feel that it's a gift, and I'm not just saying that to myself, to in some way convince myself that, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, but I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And the secondary part of that is I too, for the very first time, went to a public library last week to just use the space to get out of the house to kind
Yeah.
of feel just a wee bit more, just a little bit more dynamic, just to see some human beings and such, and just get a wee bit of a different angle in terms of what I'm doing in that particular moment. And I'm definitely going to do that again. So any aspiring entrepreneurs out there, research, if you're looking for space, there is free public space available at city and local libraries for you to use.
It's kind of a cliche that you'll find maybe people trying to found companies at like coffee shops and even libraries, but I think you're right. If you want to start a company, you do need to get out of the house. Like
Yeah.
you need to surround yourself with busyness, people who are talking, sharing ideas. You have to expose yourself to sort of stimuli, or whatever you could say, to get that creativity going and to motivate yourself. It's much harder than I think a lot of people realize to not have a plan, not have a somebody leading you, not have somebody who can tell you what to do next. And when you just get out of bed in the morning and brush your teeth, and then you ask yourself, "What do I do now?" And
Yeah.
if it's just sort of like go back to bed. You're definitely not going to get anywhere. Having that sort of, mental fortitude to say, nope, I'm going to put on my nice shirt. I'm going to put on some pants. I'm going to go to the cafe. I'm going to have an espresso. I'm going to meet some people. That really is a, necessary part of, I think, getting any company off the ground, right?
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's a great segue. I was looking to see your entrepreneurial journey was obviously in existence before you
A
met
little
up
bit.
with the Neo folks, especially, or at least with exposure to people who were, charting a path in terms of their own startup journey and your input to that. What
Yeah.
would you say would be the greatest lesson that you took into the partnership that became Neo Financial eventually as you were going forward?
That's a good question. I would say something I definitely learned from previous startups. Not all of them were successful. I actually had some that failed pretty quickly. I had some that dragged on and had a rocky journey, right? And
Yeah,
I think persistence is something that I brought with me to Neo. This idea that if things don't work out, and you were kind of saying this earlier too, right? Maybe you were talking with a friend and they said, "Hey, sales weren't what they imagined they'd be right away." Um, I think early in my career, I bought into this idea of fail fast,
yeah,
or there's a book, The Lean Startup, and the book is all about sort of like trying ideas, validating them, and you sort of keep trying new things really quickly until you kind of hit on something that just is like a runaway win.
yeah,
And I kind of learned, I think, that's not how the world often works. You sometimes have to just persist, right? So you have an idea, you try it, it doesn't work out. Keep trying. Same idea. Don't give up. Try some more, try some more, try some more. There'll be setbacks. Work through the setbacks. There'll be things where you just don't know what to do next. Figure it out. Get someone to help you. And that sort of persistence approach to a problem is something that I think has been unique about Neo, but sort of was a lesson I learned from earlier companies where I think my instinct was, hey, if something's not working, it's not meant to be,
yeah,
or I'm not going to crack this nut, so I better move on to some other problem. And sometimes that sort of pivoting, founders talk about doing a pivot, that it becomes almost an addictive thing. Like if you're failing, just do a pivot, right? That's okay. Every startup has to pivot. So if you're failing, just do a pivot.
yeah,
But you don't really want to do that. You want to persist. Neo's been a journey where we had this vision to disrupt banking. Obviously, that was going to be
yeah,
super hard in Canada too, because we have these giant banks in Canada. So it's like the most David and Goliath story imaginable. And there was not going to be an easy win
yeah.
to tackling that problem. It was just going to be persisting, and that's who we are at Neo. And yeah, it's brought us this far.
Yeah. Do you know, I love that. And there's a whole bunch of things that we could unpack in terms of the persistence. I'm reminded of the book. I don't know if you've read the book, The Greatest Salesman by Og Mandino.
I haven't read that one.
Very, very short book, and it's not really not a sales book. It's a life journey, self development. Stand up for your principles and follow through. But one of the main chapters, which is part of the story, is I will persist until I succeed, and very much everything that you said there, Chris, in
Yeah.
terms of going through that. And I wonder how much of that you mentioned the vision in terms of persisting. You have your vision and then you'll persist towards that. How much would you say of that was belief, where you're saying they just don't understand it yet? We know this. We've done our reps in the library. We've planned this for months. It's not a whim. This is why we're going to continue. And maybe we just change the way we say it, but we're not actually
Right.
changing the model or the offering in and of itself.
I think that was part of Neo's success story. We did spend a lot of time sort of planning the business. People often think that we must have been wasting time for those first 4 or 5 months, because we really didn't do much other than plan
Yeah.
for 4 or 5 months. But it was getting that clarity of vision, understanding not only what we wanted to do, but also understanding the customers, the marketplace, the competitors. I remember early on, Andrew wanted to buy some data, some industry data, and it was thousands and thousands of dollars to buy this data. And, I'm just like, can't we Google it? Like that's going to be a lot cheaper, right? And keep in mind, we're paying for this ourselves. We're bootstrapping at this point. So thousands of dollars is just thousands of dollars out of our pockets, right?
Yeah.
And, he kind of impressed upon me, actually how important it was to invest in understanding, every aspect of what we were about to get into and the problem we were trying to tackle. You can't really start solving the problem until you understand the problem.
Yeah.
And so we did buy industry data. We learned about what competitors were doing. We dug into other fintechs and other banks. Even, outside of Canada, looking internationally, we started familiarizing ourselves with the fintechs in Europe and the fintechs in South America, and, really going broad to understand every single aspect of the problem. And then, getting that certainty, like you said, that there is actually a problem here. We do actually think we can solve it. Somebody's going to solve it. I think that's something that I've always said. Somebody's going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
It might not be Neo, but somebody's going to do it. So, why not? Why not us? I would rather it was, a Calgary-based company than, something like what we often hear in Canada is a US company is coming into Canada.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's this product. It's been big in New York. It's been big in San Francisco. They're going to launch it in Canada, next year. And you kind of get it late and it's just you're just following, right? I'd much rather we kind of did something here in Canada and tackled the problem ourselves. And that's what Neo's kind of been about.
Yeah, Canadians know Canadians, so it'd be kind of nice if we could
Exactly.
solve our own
Our
challenges.
banking industry is kind of our problem. It's our fault. It got like this.
Yeah.
We should solve it ourselves. If we don't, eventually some international competitors, will come to Canada and help disrupt the market here. But again, I'd much rather, Canadians band together and actually create something lasting, right here on the prairies.
Yeah, fantastic. And I was going to ask, and I think you've started to answer in terms of the debate about buying the data or not, and what benefit that's going to be or not. And my next question is around what are the facets or foundational principles or practices or philosophies or cultural items, without obviously divulging any competitive advantages that you have internally to an organization. But how do you think that, or what are the primary reasons, is probably the best way to say it, that Neo has enjoyed the success that you have thus far?
Yeah. I don't think there are any proprietary secrets that, if I tell you, one of my co-founders is going to be upset with me. Pretty transparent. And actually secrecy is one of the things that I think is overrated. I sometimes hear about these startups. They say, we're in stealth mode. I can't tell you the name of the company. I can't tell you what our product is. We're in stealth mode. And Neo was never in stealth mode. We'll just tell everybody what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I think the proof is sort of in the, in the results and in the hard work. And anybody can, say they're in stealth mode. So yeah, secrecy is not one of the secrets.
Yeah.
It's been, I think our culture has been really important at Neo. Our kind of view on culture at Neo is that it's something you design. So as a founder, you have to plan, what culture do we want? What culture do we need to get us to the next milestone or to get us to success? And I think a lot of companies, culture is almost an accident. It's like an output of who you hire. Maybe you luck out and get some extroverted people. Maybe you luck out and get some introverted people, but it's more luck. Who do you happen to hire becomes your culture. And I think at Neo, we wanted it to be more like, we know what culture is going to succeed. Let's build it. Let's hire the people that will help us create the culture we want to have and keep that culture on track. Because, if you have that, and by culture, I mean things like, having passionate people who actually care about the product, who actually care about the industry, that kind of stuff isn't a nice to have if you want to build, a really fast growing, successful story. It's like a must have, right? So we carefully kind of designed out, all right, we do need passion. We do need people who care. We do need people who see themselves as a customer of Neo. And then we're going to make sure each and every person has that level of ownership, has that level of kind of commitment to the mission we're on, and it's not just sort of a way to pay their bills.
Yeah.
It's great that we can build a sustainable company where everybody who works here can have a great life, but more than that, we actually do need to care and have that shared kind of shared experience.
Yeah.
We need to value things like relationships has been a big part of Neo's culture. Making sure that people who work together aren't just colleagues, in sort of like a formal, stuffy sort of way, but we're actually treating each other like friends or like family,
Yeah.
at the company. That kind of thing has been really, really, really important in keeping
Yeah.
Neo successful. And I mentioned ownership too. That's kind of been a principle. Again, we don't really shy away from. We've actually shared ownership with everybody who works at Neo. We're big on shared startup equity, making sure people actually have a piece of the company if they join the company, and that way, if the company succeeds, they have something to win,
Yeah.
something to gain, and then if the company fails, they also have something to lose.
Yeah.
If that startup equity doesn't do well, they're losing, and all of us kind of having that shared experience of being an owner, kind of all being co-founders,
Yeah.
is something that persists to this day. One of the most employee-owned, tech startups of our size in Canada, and every single person who works here, especially people who've been here for 4 or 5 years, they're like, this is my company,
Yeah.
not just the company I work at, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's been a big reason why Neo has moved so quickly and achieved some success.
And how much do you attribute that to the genuine amount of planning and intention that you set in the beginning? Because there might be the odd occasion, I would imagine, I've never founded a company, but there would be the odd occasion to just bend a little bit on your
Yeah,
principles to
all the
say,
time.
oh, the path of least resistance is this way. Maybe we should just get a win. And it sounds like especially in the recruiting, where you said we
Yeah.
can't.
It is actually very difficult to focus on building the company and not just getting the day's tasks done in the most expedient way possible.
Yeah,
We've actually not never had a contractor, for example, at Neo, where
yeah,
I've brought in a contractor and just said, hey, for the next 4 to 6 months, we're going to pay you as a contractor to get something done.
mm,
It has been tempting many, many times to just say, you know what, we could have a contractor in here on Monday and they could be, hitting the ground running and getting this task done. But instead, we're going to go out there and spend weeks or months canvassing for hiring, somebody to actually join the team, care about the company, become a part of the team, and sometimes even training somebody up,
yeah,
maybe hiring somebody junior, investing in them. We go through that extra pain, and yeah, it's very tempting to compromise some of those principles, but I think, having founded a couple of companies before, you kind of look back and you realize that even the times when you did it and you achieved the result that you wanted, you did lose out on something by compromising those principles, right? You did lose a bit of your culture. The team was a little bit less bought in after that.
mm,
People cared a little bit less. It became a little more um, of just sort of like a corporation or something like that in
yeah,
the really, again, maybe political sense. And yeah, that's not who we want to be. So
yeah.
we have to try as hard as we can to hold on to those principles. So yeah, to this day, we're still driven by equity. We're still, having that family and friends culture. Still trying to find people who share our passion.
Yeah.
And there's also been times when good friends of mine who are amazing software developers have come to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to work at Neo," and I know that they can write off. They're going to be able to write the software.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had to say no, actually, or just, hey, maybe have a conversation. Is this really the place for you? And it's because I know that they're maybe not that culture fit, or they don't actually care about, maybe banking or improving, a product for millions of Canadians.
Yeah.
well, I know it's just a short term, stop on their journey. They really want to be somewhere else.
Mhm.
And yeah, it has to actually be like a true win-win and a fit.
Yeah,
Um, and that's kind of walking the harder road,
yeah,
but it's what also creates momentum,
yeah,
and that's something that I was actually hoping to get to talk about this. We grew Neo through the pandemic,
yeah.
and a lot of companies survived through the pandemic, but the hardest part was momentum.
Mhm.
When you're working at home, when you're distracted by your health, your family, the news, um, getting momentum, that sense that it's like sort of snowballing and
Yeah,
like has its own gravity.
yeah,
Getting that going was super super hard when we were all distracted and couldn't get together and couldn't bounce ideas off each other or feed on each other's enthusiasm.
yeah,
And yeah, that momentum, it's very hard to like explain what it is,
yeah,
but when you get it, your business jumps ahead. You can get 5 years of wins in a year if you
yeah,
have that sort of momentum feeling. And once you have it too, people can't even stop it. It almost just like, it carries you. And even if there's an obstacle, in your path, or there's a setback, the momentum just carries you right through it,
yeah,
if you have it. And if you don't have the momentum, no amount of like smart people, no amount of, showing up early or staying late, that stuff's not going to help you if
yeah.
you don't have that sort of difficult to quantify, characteristic, that momentum.
Yeah, I love that. It's so poignant, and going back to the no contractor philosophy and policy, quite unusual, certainly in the Calgary landscape,
Yeah.
and from where we met, and even
Yeah, we met at Shaw, and there were like thousands of people contracting, and
yeah,
they would come and go for 6 months to a year, at a time. And again, many of them probably didn't care that much if they were contracting at Shaw or at an oil and gas company or a tech company.
yeah,
It was more again like a short term thing for them, right? six
yeah.
months, it'll be over before you know it.
Yeah, and one of the things that always really worried me, and I know that I was somewhat in the minority when I was doing my contract project management role, was who's going to take this institutional knowledge when I leave? Like, I'm more than happy. I don't want to use this as any sort of leverage for future employment. I would be happy to come back and help you if we've both had a good experience. That wasn't always the
Yeah.
case, to be honest. But what happens? And I was kind of, what's the best word to use without sounding so sensational? I was kind of staggered by the number of organisations that said, "Cheerio, we'll maybe see you
Mhm.
again. Thanks for that," without sitting down and saying, "What did you see here? What was your experience? If you were coming back in again, how would you do this differently? What would you recommend from an outgoing, conscientious professional as to what you think we should do in order to make the experience better, the onboarding, the integration, the whatever else it is, the experience that is they're looking to try and get." But most organizations, so if you think about my or the standard contract person who maybe isn't, or most likely isn't, as invested as the co-founders, as the full-time members of staff, and then if you think about the organization having a little bit less investment in them, it ends up being like just a bad set of ingredients.
Exactly. It compounds, right? It's like
Yeah,
every sort of layer is just a little bit less connected, a little bit
yeah,
weaker, a little more likely to fall apart. If somebody leaves or, again, a contract ends or something like that.
yeah,
And you're sort of in the situation where each little part might seem okay, but again, there's this sort of, the whole is supposed to be greater than the sum of the parts.
yeah,
But if everybody's not pulling in the same direction, if everybody's not committed, it doesn't really work out that way, right?
yeah.
And I shared that experience at another company. I won't mention the name, of this other contract I did while I was doing some contracting, but I remember one of the full-time employees actually telling me to my face, like, after your guys' contract is done, we're actually going to just delete and erase and undo all the work you did because we don't want to maintain that long
Wow.
term. And we were there to implement some improvements and changes in the business. And again, there were full-time people saying, you know what, after you guys are gone at the end of the year, the team is just going to go back the way we were.
Yeah,
And that's extremely disheartening, right?
yeah,
That, there are contractors there to again, improve something. And then there are other people who are not aligned just saying, we're going to go back to whatever was easiest for us
Yeah.
after your contract is over. So that was one of the moments that actually got me out of contracting permanently and led me back into the startup life.
Yeah.
Just, honestly couldn't go to work every day,
Yeah.
realizing that the hard work I was doing, it was probably not going to actually create like any sort of legacy or long-term improvement.
Yeah.
And there were so many people on the team that, maybe didn't have, skin in the game, or didn't, all they really wanted to optimize for was status quo.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, not for me.
No, and it's for some other people, and I completely appreciate that. And I've noticed that through my own personal journey, where everyone has a role to play, everyone has a role to fulfill, and some people are happy with a certain type and style of professional, contributory experience, and other people not so much. Because way back in the day, when I started my consulting journey, I was I would say the word I would use now is resigned. I didn't use that word, in a negative context in the beginning, to say I'm comfortable earning a wage that I'm earning, helping other people or other organizations make more money through process improvements, through introduction, sorry, of new products or services, or whatever it is that they're doing in
Yep.
the marketplace. And then the more time went on, and picture this, I'm at the forefront of a lot of this stuff because I'm managing the project. So I'm not completely embedded in the organization. I get to see the strategy. I get to see and feel what executives are feeling about these investments that they're making. And then over time, I started to get to that spot where I'm thinking, actually, am I resigned to doing that? I don't actually think I am. And I never had anyone say, by the way, I'm going to throw out all of your work when you leave. But when I started to have, if I could call it a legacy of looking back, there was no discernible difference I was making. I managed some projects, I had some fun, I made some relationships, I learned and grew with each project or organization that I worked with. And then I started to go, there has to be something different. There has to be some level of difference making that I can make with people, with organizations, with, clarity, with vision, with relationships, as you've said, with momentum, whatever it is I'm looking at, which was the inspiration behind, my journey too. So it sounds very analogous in terms of what that looks like. And I imagine what you're doing for your staff, whether this is intentional or not, is you're protecting their peace. You're giving them the opportunity to say, we're the exact same. It doesn't matter what the title is. It doesn't matter, back to the ownership model, but even just the culture of saying, we're going to do this together because you know what? We can. And see if something comes up that we can't. There may be a very odd occasion, very, very odd occasion where it just makes the most sense. We will discuss, we will align, we will agree, we
Yeah.
will move forward. But for the most part, this is the band, and we're going to
Yeah.
keep the band together, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing.
I think, we do talk sometimes at Neo about, metaphors like, the band, or
Yeah,
even a sports team. I know sports metaphors are kind of not the best business metaphors, but there is sort of that it's not just sort of a business arrangement,
yeah,
that you have. If you were a rock band, you become like family, or if,
yeah,
again, you're on a winning sports team, you're somehow closer to those, people than you are just as employees, right? By winning together, losing together,
yeah,
gruelingly hard challenges, and overcoming obstacles, like you get closer to them, right? So
yeah,
yeah, that I think that's pretty important. Although I don't want to just, crap on consulting. I do think, there were consulting engagements I had where I felt like I made a huge difference.
yeah,
I, saved the day, rescued some failed project, from obscurity, or coached a business to be better than it ever was. And I felt like that effect persisted. So I don't want to just say, everyone who's consulting doesn't make an impact. You definitely can. But what I found is, you know, finding those contracts and those opportunities where everybody was aligned and you had that impact was very, very challenging. And
yeah.
it was more like 1 in 10, at least for
Mhm.
me, maybe 1 in 5 opportunities might come out that way. Whereas actually starting my own company, I had 100%,
Yeah.
chance of actually making it that way, as long as I was dedicated to principles and I hired like-minded people and we were all, in it together. So,
Yeah.
yeah, consulting can still be great
Yeah.
and contracting can still be great. Um, but it is hard to
Mhm.
find those relationships out there in the wide world,
Yeah.
when you're in that kind of, consulting position where
Yeah.
it all aligns. It's almost like, yeah, it has to be like that lucky break or that magic that happens.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've had a few engagements like that too.
Yeah. Two and a
Um,
half.
yeah,
Two
there's
and a
very
half.
few, right, in your
Yeah.
career, and me too. Like I think I had one or two, moments
Yeah.
when I was like, this was really, really worth it,
Yeah.
and a lot of moments when it wasn't.
Yeah.
But at startup companies or following this entrepreneurship path, um, it's like, well, I'm not going to quit until it is like that.
Yeah.
And if it's not like that yesterday, then I get up today and make it that kind of valuable experience today.
Yeah, nudge it further and further along the road
Yeah,
towards
exactly.
what you're looking for. So
Yeah.
then, in terms of fintech is certainly a label or an industry that gets a lot of press in Calgary. We seem to be becoming quite the hub, So I don't know if
True.
that's the influence from Neo or Neo has helped exacerbate that, through ongoing osmosis and growth within the organization. Either way, it's a good thing.
I don't think we can take all the credit. There are a lot of great fintech companies. What's an example like Helsim here in Calgary,
Yeah,
right? That have been around a lot longer than Neo. But I think um, we have hit some sort of critical mass
yeah,
where a lot of companies have been started here. Maybe some of the people, went to work at one of those companies, moved on to another company, another company. We've been sharing the knowledge, building that shared pool of expertise. And yeah,
yeah,
Calgary does seem to be a real fintech hub now with probably a dozen successful financial tech companies. Neo's just been maybe one with one of the larger dreams, larger visions, and
yeah,
and then we've raised more money because we had to hit that size of opportunity, and then that's meant more hiring. So Neo is kind of a bigger player in the space, but there are, yeah, a lot of awesome fintech companies here. We're setting all kinds of records for fundraising, hiring, and I saw an article the other day saying that Calgary is being transformed by tech companies, which
yeah.
I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. One of the things when we were talking about bands and sports analogies and stuff,
Yeah.
I love all that stuff. That's the type of style of stuff that I would use to in some way emphasize a point. It made me think earlier there, Chris, about an interview I heard. I'm a big Beatles fan. I love the Beatles,
Mhm.
and John Lennon was interviewed, and someone said like, how are you guys so good? And he says, I have no idea. We were just four guys doing what a whole bunch of other folks were doing. We all had the same opportunity, the same sort of skill level and such, and we just made it big. And they didn't. And I don't know that he was underplaying it or doing himself a disservice. I think he was just so much in the moment, he didn't have much time to contemplate
Yeah.
actually what made you folks different from other bands that are doing okay, but they're not revolutionizing things. They're not changing the landscape of music or the industry in and
Mhm.
of itself at the same time.
I think, in those types of situations, the people in the band, sometimes I think if they're successful, they take for granted the things that they're doing
Mhm.
that the other bands aren't doing, right? So obviously neither of us were in the Beatles, but
Yeah,
I would bet that they talked about music a lot, that they
yeah,
practiced a lot, that they worked at all hours. They probably got together in the evenings and at night and jammed together and played together. And they probably thought all the other bands are doing that stuff. All the
yeah.
other bands are practicing in the wee hours, talking about music, writing lyrics obsessively in notebooks, all these types of
Researching.
things.
Yeah,
I don't think that's true.
yeah,
Probably a lot of bands, they get together for a practice twice a week. They have day jobs. They don't think about the band all day. They, one or two people in the band maybe write some lyrics. The other ones are like, not my job to write the lyrics. And then
yeah,
they don't become the Beatles, right? And so,
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to see it, I think, from the inside, but they probably had like a shared passion
yeah,
and sort of like almost almost their whole lives were being kind of poured into, you know, creating that band. I
yeah.
don't think they would have made it as big if that wasn't the level of passion and interest
Yeah.
they had, especially, you know, when there's so much competition
Yeah.
out there. It has to be that sort of thing. And I don't think it's luck. I honestly don't think any successful sports team, band, business, or anything else is just 100% luck. There might be a tiny bit of luck involved, but it is mostly that passion. And I can only speak for myself here, but I do some of my best problem solving every morning when I'm in the shower. So
Right.
I'm in the shower, I turn on the hot water, I'm standing under the water, and I'm actually thinking about, okay, what are some of the problems that I need to solve, maybe a Neo, right? And that really does turn into more success during the day. The fact that I'm, instead of just singing my favorite tune and, you
Yeah.
know, whatever, soaping myself up, I'm actually solving problems. And I think that's exactly the kind of moment that, founders or champions
Yeah.
or, rock stars probably have all the time, right? It's those like unusual times when their head is still
Mm.
in their passion and in their area of expertise, and they're working away
Yeah.
at it, right?
It's definitely not just a job. It's a lifestyle or a
Yeah, it's a
life
life.
a life purpose, life goal and such. And I was just also thinking there, just in terms of some of the titans of business or sports or even rock and roll or any area that you spend a lot of time. When you think about the people who have genuine longevity, decades long of success, where you're kind of thinking they've just never gone away. They've just re-evolved or reimagined themselves or whatever that looks like. And I thought that was such a poignant point that you made earlier in terms of you kind of you assume everyone else is doing what you're doing, but what sets you apart is what you're doing.
Mhm.
And if you get to that point where you then sit down and say, I'm thinking here actually about the British cycling example. I don't know if you've ever read the case study about that, where British cycling was in the toilet. It wasn't doing well. They were sick of not competing at the Olympics and the Tour de
Mhm.
France and the other major races and such. And they promoted a guy from within and basically said, like, help us figure this out. And he went into like the nth degree of detail for absolutely everything, from the equipment to the sleeping patterns to the pillows that they use, through
Right.
the what they wear, through their diet, through what their home life looks like, and all those sorts of things, and just getting those little incremental, being thirsty enough to go after those little incremental changes where you're like,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. It always does that. It'll fix itself eventually.
Right.
He was saying, no, let's fix that just now. And then talking about what you said earlier in terms of the compounding, of these positive acts upon positive acts upon positive acts gets you to a model that's
Gets you
slightly
there.
different.
Exactly. Just doing the normal thing, you just get normal results.
Yes.
And yeah, you need some sort of level of passion, obsession, detail that goes, I think, to another level.
Yeah.
And yeah, we again, I've had some of that in my career, something I sort of learned, and at Neo too, we kind of built it into our DNA
Yeah.
to think that way. Um, and yeah, that plus hard work, creativity, and hiring great people, smart people.
Yeah.
Trying to build not just a band of a few people, but a big group of people who think that way and work that way. Yeah, it can do amazing things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, definitely a powerful force. And does not just apply to business either.
Definitely.
Actually, something I ask in interviews often is if people have maybe learned to play an instrument or maybe learned a foreign language, because those are the types of problems and challenges that require almost the same mentality.
Yeah.
If you just try to, learn to play piano or guitar or speak, another language, and you kind of just half-ass it and put in a little bit of effort, you're never really going to get very far,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
absolutely have to become very immersed in it, very dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Spend probably years of your life working
Yeah.
on it day in and day out. And there are a lot of people out there who, if they haven't had that experience at work, they actually have had it in their personal life or in
Yeah.
their hobby or in their passion or maybe as part of immigration or
Yeah.
moving somewhere new. They've had to overcome those tough challenges, and definitely that's something I seek out when I
Yeah.
want. want to work with somebody is someone who can put in that level of attention to detail and persistence and kind of has that drive, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not, again, it's been in their work in the past, as long as they understand what it feels like
Yeah.
and what it takes, then they can do it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a great segue. Obviously, this podcast is, basically dedicated to self-improvement, self-development. It's
Hmm.
to try and get yourself to a better version of yourself each and every day. And one of the key questions I use for primarily for one-on-one clients, sometimes with group or team clients that I have on my coaching side of my life is, can you share, like, if someone, especially if they're stuck and they're saying, I just don't see a way through to this next level, this next area, this next element of freedom or whatever that looks like, I then ask a question along the lines of, can you recall a time in the past when you had a challenge similar in terms of the feelings that you have right now, and what did you do to overcome that? And typically there's a wee bit of resistance in the beginning, and then when they start to recount their memory bank, they're saying, well, I don't know if this is really relevant, but when I was just leaving high school, and then they'll tell a story, and
Right.
you'll be like, okay, so what are the key facets of that approach, that dedication, that drive, that, without burdening yourself with all that, oh, well, life has changed now and I have so many other things going on.
Yeah.
But what did you do? Because you can really break it down into its most simplistic form to say, why don't you do that again? And then they kind of look at you and they blink a few times and they go, I have no reason. Why not? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Then you can move on from
Yep.
there. So, the Best You, a coaching podcast, I like to try and wrap up the interviews with a question that you could maybe either educate and or inspire the audience with.
Sure.
What's one regular practice out with your shower in the morning? I had a mental image when you
Yeah.
said that
Sorry
earlier,
about
and,
that
and
one.
that's some things you can't mentally unsee. But what's one regular practice that you employ that enables you to become the best version of yourself?
That's that's a good question. I think something I try and do is I take a moment and I think about what my goals are, and I try to make bigger ones,
Right.
right? So it's an exercise in making a more ambitious outcome for myself
Yeah.
than what I've been going after. And I find it's just very easy to be busy, to
Yeah.
get lost in the day to day, to be getting stuff done, checking off boxes on a checklist. You might be succeeding, you might not be succeeding. I think it's really powerful to just take the time to reassess, where you're going, what your goals are, but then set that horizon a little higher. And yeah, as we've grown Neo, we've constantly sort of been moving that goalpost
Yeah.
for the company to a new height.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of scary. It's like I don't know if we're going to be able to get there.
Yeah.
But I try and do that personally too, right? So what am I aiming to learn? What am I aiming to do? And then what if I raise that bar, to a little scarier height
Yeah.
and started trying to go after that? Um, and actually, I would rather be struggling or failing to go after like a bigger goal or a more ambitious kind of milestone in my life or in my job than having something that was in reach and just hitting it.
Yeah.
Um, that's not something that's motivating. That's not something that
Yeah.
keeps you feeling fresh, um or gets you through the tough times.
Yeah.
Having a lot of sort of easy wins. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of my practice, is taking that extra time. Um, Sometimes I'll make notes on a piece of paper, or I'll actually write out, okay, here's where I think I'm going to be in 6 months, and then write a new version of that
Yeah.
that's even more ambitious.
Yeah.
Um, and I had the fortune of working with some people here at Neo, who were actually former Olympians, former Olympic
Oh,
athletes.
wow.
We had quite a few people who won medals for Canada
Yeah.
join the team here at Neo, and I get to work with them every day in different sports. And
Yeah.
that's something that I really picked up from them is um, they were going for such big, like ambitious goals that I probably realized that, my goals seem so small
Yeah.
compared to theirs. I'm just like, yeah, try and hit this deadline on Friday. And they're like, oh yeah, I spent 10 years trying to win gold for,
Yeah.
bobsled or something. And, it makes you think like, holy, maybe I should be trying to win gold in bobsled
Yeah.
or win gold in banking. Right.
Yeah.
So setting
Yeah.
that a little bit more ambitiously,
Yeah.
yeah, really been a driving force for me.
And it sounds, even just through the energy of you saying exactly what you said there, Chris, it sounds like that's an absolute motivator for you, not a demotivator, not something where you're kind of like, oh, I was so close and now you've pushed it further away. It's almost kind of like, I'm ready for the next one.
Part of the reason it might be like that is just getting older. We're both getting a little older. Like you said,
Yeah.
we met 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and we both had, successes in our career. A lot of people in Neo have had successes in their career. A lot of people in tech in Calgary have had successes in their past.
Yeah.
Once you've had a few, it does start to motivate you less,
Mhm.
right? You can have another one just like it because you've done it 2 times, 3 times. You've gotten that job, you've gotten that project done, you've built that software, you've built that product. And if once you've done it 3 times, the fourth time is not going to be that exciting. So, yeah, I think maybe, that ambitious goal is more motivating than demotivating because I'm kind of getting older and had my share of experiences doing all kinds of different things and almost need it to not get repetitive or stale, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just before I let you go, one of the key themes that's come through for me today, you mentioned it at the beginning and it's been sprinkled through the entire thing, is relationships. I mean, you and I wouldn't be chatting right now if we didn't have a relationship
Hmm.
that lasted a decade and a half thus far. How critical and crucial has relationships been for you personally and professionally to give you the successes you've enjoyed thus far?
I like that question. Sometimes actually I hear people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. I actually don't like that because it kind of makes you think that if you don't know people, if you don't know enough people, you're never going to succeed.
Yeah,
I'm not friends with Elon Musk. I don't know a billionaire. I don't know investors. I don't know entrepreneurs, so I can't do it. So I don't think it's who you know that makes you a success. I think it's actually hard work and planning and being dedicated that
yeah,
makes people a success, not who you know. Um, but relationships are super important. Um, and I think as you undertake, difficult problems, difficult work and challenges, the relationships are what makes it easier, makes it sustainable,
mm,
gets you through the hard times. And that's actually one reason why Neo has 4 co-founders. We That's a lot of co-founders,
yeah,
honestly. Some companies just have one founder, right? Um, I think none of us wanted to do it alone.
yeah,
None of us thought we could do it alone. We knew there'd be some tough times ahead. Having been through companies in the past too, you just know there's going to be some real tough times, and you're going to need those relationships to pull you through.
yeah,
When I'm having a bad day, my co-founder Kris often, comes around and cheers me up, and I try and maybe do the same once in a while for him. Yeah, that kind of stuff really matters, right? So,
yeah,
don't know if that's an answer to your question. Relationships super important.
yeah,
They're what sustain you. They're what get you through the ups and downs. But on
yeah,
the other hand, I don't want to over-index on like networking and just knowing everyone.
yeah,
I think some of the most successful founders I've met, they don't necessarily have those sort of insider relationships,
yeah,
and they've just been really smart, hardworking people
yeah,
who you know they got the job done,
yeah,
they got results, and then the relationships came when people saw their success,
mhm,
and we're like, wow, that's somebody I really want to meet. That's
yeah,
somebody I really want to get to know or work with because they're doing such amazing work, right?
yeah,
Um, and in some ways, that's how we met. I actually remember at Shaw being like, this is the best project manager at Shaw. and really wanting to, maybe kindle some sort of relationship because of the hard work you were putting in, and just admiring your work ethic and the challenges you were overcoming.
And that's very kind of you to say. A lot of different people would remember that experience differently, I'm sure. The funny thing you said there, not funny, it's actually not funny. The really poignant thing you said there is the value of intentional networking, because there are a lot of people out there that I would classify as collectors. People who have a whole bunch of business cards, they happen to bump into someone at some place, or they've exchanged a couple of direct messages over social media or something, and then they classify it as my friend, my colleague, and you're kind of like, wow, that's a level of relationship, yes, but is it a meaningful relationship that is, it has the potential to develop both of you and be mutually beneficial and better for the world? Probably not in
Probably
that
not.
infancy
Yeah.
stage at that time. But then to get yourself the opportunity, and one thing I really took from that was you appreciated you couldn't do this alone. You didn't want to do this alone. I was actually teaching an undergraduate class at the U of C this morning and saying, advocate for yourself. You will not be able to go through a successful career without relationships being formed and forged over a variety of experiences that you have, and that's okay. Whenever you see a successful sports person, say for example in an individual sport, they point to their box and they say, I'd like to thank my box, and there's 12 people
Yeah.
there. That everyone is there's no one doing it alone. Even the combat artist that's out doing his own thing, there's a team of people behind.
Yeah, or like, the movie star, you might think they're just like a charismatic, actor, but when they get up on the podium at the Oscars, they get, played off by
Yeah,
some song, because they have a long list of people to thank that
exactly.
have carried them and influenced them and helped them. So yeah,
Exactly.
everybody does need people to work with, and uh, you know, if there's more people involved, you get a smaller slice of the pie, but you have the potential to build a bigger pie, make a bigger pie.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I also think that's a bit of Neo's story. A lot of people at Neo, not just people who were co-founders, could have started their own companies, but by coming together, we're doing something really big, really, really big.
Yeah.
That's only possible with those relationships.
Yeah.
You can definitely succeed alone, but you can't do something this big
Yeah.
alone, right?
Yeah. Agreed. Fabulous. Fantastic. Kris, before I let you go, my friend, where can people find out a little bit more about you and about Neo Financial?
Absolutely. Definitely check out the Neo Financial website, neofinancial.com. We're also on social media, all the usual social media places. You actually mentioned a pretty cool video, what if banking wasn't a bank? Find out a bit more about Neo by watching some of those videos. And then if you're interested in me personally, I'm pretty much only on LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
you can get me on LinkedIn, look at my profile, on LinkedIn, Kris Read in Calgary at Neo. Connect to me on there, check out my background, my posts, and even send me a message if you want to ask me questions.
And you will absolutely reply.
I try to reply. I get so many LinkedIn messages in a week, probably 300 to 500 LinkedIn messages a week, but I
Wow.
do go through them about once a week, and I fire replies to anybody I can help, anybody that needs something from me, or if they're in the local community,
Yeah.
and I can add some value there. I definitely make the time.
Fabulous. You're a good man. Kris, thanks a million. Great to connect with you again. Thanks a million for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting me. And I really appreciate the time to kind of share and catch up.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. entrepreneurial.com, and while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.